Hi, everyone. I am so excited to have the amazing Alexia Vernon here with us today. Alexia was branded a Moxie Maven by President Obama's White House Office of Public Engagement. She is a renowned speaking coach to executives, entrepreneurs, media personalities, and influencers who want to spread their bold ideas, grow their businesses, and advance their thought leadership. She supports thousands of speakers through her live and virtual trainings, retreats, and premier mastermind, the Spotlight Speakers Collective. Alexia speaks at Fortune 500 companies, industry events, CEO forums, TEDx, and United Nations. Her advice has been featured on CNN, NBC, CBS, ABC, Inc., Forbes, and Women's Health magazine. Alexia is the author of the award-winning book, Step Into Your Moxie, and the creator of the popular LinkedIn learning course, Communicating to Move People to Take Action. She'll launch her podcast, Moxielicious, in April 2020. So Alexia, thank you so much for being here. You just are so established in your craft, and I cannot wait to talk more about speaking.
Thank you for having me. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So to kick it right off, we are talking about ripple effect and how our businesses and how our craft can help support the ripple effect throughout the world. So throughout entrepreneurship, throughout the corporate world. So I'd love to just hear from you, since speaking is your main superpower. How can it really support entrepreneurs, but also people in, you serve people in corporate, in government, really increase the ripple effect, not only in their business, but throughout the world in general?
When we think of the thought leaders who have most impacted us, again, whether we are entrepreneurs or whether we are in corporate, we're probably going to identify people who are not only putting out great ideas through books, but also getting on stages to speak. Because when we have that opportunity to be in the room with somebody or in a virtual room like this, it gives us an ability to connect not only with the person, but also with the idea in a much deeper way. It's one of the reasons why TED uses the term ideas worth spreading, because when you encounter a speaker who is a master of her or his craft, you can't help but get so passionate about the idea that you want to spread it. You bring it up in conversations at dinner parties and so forth. And there's a lot of research that has suggested that when somebody, a prospective client, whether it's an individual or an organization, has the opportunity to see you speak, the cycle from prospect to client is compressed so much because people just feel that sense of credibility from the get-go from you.
Yeah, that's so true. And I never really thought about it condensing that timeline so much. That's super amazing. But if I think to my own personal experiences when I moved from corporate to entrepreneurship, some of the first mentors that I had, I saw on stage first, and I walked up to them afterwards because that's the type of person I am. And I'm like, I want to get to know you, and the rest is history. So that totally makes sense. So your specific brand is, you talk about stepping into your Moxie. So I'd love for people that aren't familiar with you to, and I love that you're branded, you have it on the wall behind you, to just hear a little bit more about what that means exactly.
Yes. For me, stepping into your Moxie is the mindset, but also the skill set that we possess when we are able to walk into any room or onto any stage and unapologetically speak up for ourselves, for the ideas and issues that matter most to us, and know that when we speak, we call people to take action.
I love that. And it's so interesting too, how you said that, stepping into that is such a thing, because I talk about embodying your brand. So really embodying that message that you want to have. And I think a lot of people show up and think of speaking as a rehearsal, like this intense speech that needs to happen. But do you feel like it's so much more powerful when you have that like vision behind it, and when you have just a really deep sense of your mission behind the talk?
Yes, I suspect we'll probably jump into some mistakes in a moment, but I love this question because for most of us, whether we consider ourselves on the introvert side of things or the extrovert, are constantly trying to figure out how do we bring the other part into the mix so that we can try to get it right for everybody. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that, but the most effective speakers can be introverts, they can be extroverts, they can be ambiverts, somewhere, in the middle. But the key is getting that right feeling where it is polished from the standpoint of every single thing we are saying is driving our audience to our call to action. But at the same time, it feels of the moment. Like we haven't given this presentation a million times before. It feels fresh and juicy and almost a little dangerous, because at any moment we're not 100% sure where that speaker might go next. And of course, that stuff you can't wing. It has to be rehearsed, but it's rehearsing it in such a way that it doesn't then feel like we're doing a stage performance that we've done day in and day out.
Right. So it can actually be fun or different. I love the word dangerous too. It's like, ooh, it kind of feels a little bit scary, but like super exciting.
Yes, and dangerous can happen in a few ways. For those who are extroverts, it might be because it's so dynamic and there's so much energy. And for introverts, it can be because we get so quiet. And there's a moment in a story where everybody's leaning forward to hear exactly what you're going to say, and it's full of emotion. So it's not that there's a particular script for how to manufacture that kind of emotion or energy, but there's definitely an art and a science for how to be able to do that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that, because just like branding, you need to show up as your authentic self. So I think so many people probably believe that they have to be super extroverted to stand up and talk to people. So it's so good to hear that if you're like me, I'm an ambivert, so I kind of fluctuate, but especially with introverts, I can understand, it just probably gives them such a sense of peace knowing that that's okay and just accept it.
Yes, and I am an introvert, uh, and there's no apologies about it anymore. When I started my career, that was really hard. I tried to mask it, so I would come out on stage and fist pump and try to be bigger than life, and that just is so not me. And
Probably energy draining too.
energy draining, but also I would leave a presentation and feel gross, for
Mm,
lack of a better word, not because anything I said I didn't agree with, but because the energy I was putting out felt so not me. And of course, as a result of that, I've been speaking since I was 19 years old. And for probably the first decade, I never felt like I was making the impact that I could have. People would come up and they would get feedback. You were articulate, or that was such an interesting point. I never thought of it that way. But nobody ever gave me feedback that suggested they'd been radically, positively transformed. People
mm,
didn't really talk about what they were going to do with the ideas. And that's a real litmus test for any of us. When people give us feedback that might be positive on the polish, but not on the transformation, particularly for entrepreneurs. And one of the transformations we're seeking to create is for people not just to take action on the idea, but want to work with us. If the feedback we're getting is not about, I feel changed and this is my new mindset, these are the new habits, I'm committing to the new behaviors I'm going to take action on, then we know we got to really look at how we're showing up as speakers, because we're probably not making the impact we could be.
right. That is so good. So that leads into my next question, which is that you believe that most of what we've been taught about growing your influence and our authority through speaking is really, really wrong. And so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And I could maybe see how that leads back into that transition that you made in your own speaking career.
Yes. So the number one mistake that I see a lot of us in this field making, because it comes from this belief that if we're going to be effective speakers, we need to come across as experts. And I vehemently disagree with that, because what our audiences are hungering for is not more content, more expertise. There's so many other mediums if that's what people are looking for from us. They can take a digital course, they can come to a webinar, they can read a case study or a report. If people are showing up live, what they're really looking for is connection and a sense of belonging with us, and a sense of belonging with the other people who are in that room. And being able to shift away from that hustle of proving ourselves to how do we facilitate transformation for people in the room is the thing that's going to make us so much more successful, not just in that speaking engagement, but ultimately in using speaking as a consistent, predictable way to be able to grow our businesses. The other, well, there's a bunch of mistakes, but something else I see a lot is this idea that we have to master good speaking. So I'll often get folks at my live events or who join my mastermind who've had a fair amount of speaker training. And a lot of my work is undoing everything that they're
Wow.
coming in with, because polish has disconnected them from humanity. And in my trainings, I absolutely will help people work on weeding out vocalized thinking, dialing up their authentic presence, learning how to tell stories and fill space with their bodies. But it's never about mastering certain gestures or overly choreographing. It's helping people understand what's in their natural speaking palette, like what do their bodies, what do their voices want to do, so that then they can make those moment-to-moment decisions and be spot on in that decision making when they're actually giving their presentations.
Yeah, that feels so beautiful, especially the authentic piece, because like you said earlier, if you're showing up as somebody you're not, and or there's just stripped of all, like you're up there like a robot and it's so perfect that it doesn't even seem real, that just makes so much sense. And I feel like too, especially since TEDx has gotten so big, that people feel like every, talking point needs to be so polished and so perfect. And for that event specifically, I'm sure it does take a lot of work to get it very concise and coherent quickly. But I love that advice. And then
Can I say something about that too?
yeah,
So
absolutely. Please.
I used to co-produce a TEDx event, and a lot of my early speakers were TEDx speakers. I still work on some of those talks in addition to keynotes, but a lot of business transformational presentations that might be happening at industry events. But no matter what the medium is, I still work the same process, which is never about sitting down to write out all of your content, because speaking is an oral form. It's not meant to feel like I'm reading my book aloud or I'm reading my blog post aloud. And the way to get around that, whether you are a brand new speaker or you've been doing it for decades, is to stand up, get out from behind your computer screen and actually walk and talk your ideas, and then sit down and make your notes. And I've never seen somebody who has written everything out without coming up with the language from speaking ever feel like they're really speaking with me. It inevitably always feels like that person's speaking at me. And this is probably one of the areas where I hit resistance from people more than from anywhere else, because speakers will tell me, I've always done it this way, or I'm so much more comfortable with writing. And the irony of the work that I do is that I'm more comfortable with writing. Writing my book brought up so much less sensation than any keynote I've ever done. With that said, I know that I can't just memorize sections of my book and get out and speak, even with a background in performance. It will not work. It will not make impact. It will not transform people's lives. And so while there's lots of things I hope people take away from this conversation, for those who are committed to speaking, I hope one of the top things is no writing everything out. You can absolutely get things to a place where they're relatively scripted, but make sure you spoke the message first, you spoke the stories, and then you sat down and transcribed.
Yes, thank you for that. That tip is gold, because I think so many people, like you said, sit behind the computer screen, the blank cursor blinking, and yeah, especially I love how you said walking too, to get movement going and just see what comes and flows naturally. So you talked about, whether you're new or whether you're established speaker, but for those people that are new, I think there's this certain idea in people's heads that they need to get to a certain level before they can speak and before they can step onto stage or before they can be on a podcast. So first of all, what are your thoughts around that? And then also, how would you suggest that if people want to get their first speaking gig, how would they go about doing that?
This is a fantastic question. Thank you for asking it. The problem with waiting until we are known, whatever known looks like for you, 5,000 people on my email list, X amount of revenue, I've crossed six figures or multiple six figures, or I've got 10,000 followers on Instagram, whatever it is. The problem with all of it is that there's this sense that you need to achieve expert status before you speak to serve, before you speak to grow your brand. And the problem is that speaking is one of the fastest ways to grow your brand. I don't see it as a chicken and an egg. I see it as a very clear, while the kinds of stages we're going after might evolve along with our thought leadership and our business growth, if we wait, then what's going to inevitably happen is we're not going to be ready for those bigger stages, even if our thought leadership suggests that we should be, because we haven't been buffing up the muscle. And like all muscles, if we don't use them, they don't develop. What I recommend for new people, but also for people who are really seasoned, is to ask yourself, what's the primary goal in your business right now? And we can make it super simple: getting comfortable with visibility, getting private clients. And private clients doesn't just mean one-on-one, but it means individuals, whether it's for retreats or masterminds. Is the goal organizational opportunities, consulting, corporate training, corporate keynotes? Or is it thought leadership, really standing out in my industry as that go-to person, not necessarily with a revenue goal? Maybe your revenue is really awesome, and right now you just want to be seen more in your industry. But if you can answer which of those buckets you are, getting comfortable with visibility, wanting private clients, organizational opportunities, or thought leadership, that's going to then dictate the kinds of opportunities you want for your speaking. So if it's just getting comfortable with visibility, maybe you're super new to your business. I'm not one of those people who says just, never speak to a Kiwanis club, never speak to a Rotary club, never do a Toastmasters. While you may not see a single return in terms of clients from those opportunities, if it gets you practicing getting comfortable with managing the sensation in your body, sculpting the message, go for it if that's what your primary goal is. Now, if the primary goal is private clients, again, not rocket science, you got to think about, well, where are my ideal clients? For many female entrepreneurs in e-women chapters, they are hanging out in the National Association of Women Business Owner chapters. They are hanging out in other female coaches, mastermind and group coaching programs. And so you may not be paid for those engagements on the front end, but if that's where your clients are and you're working on developing a premium offering, one client from one of those opportunities could translate in $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, depending on what your offering is. So I've got clients who have multiple seven-figure businesses who never will be paid for speaking, because they would much rather have someone in their premium program, or 2 or 3 people in their premium program from a speaking gig, than a $15,000 keynote rate, a keynote fee. If the goal is those organizational opportunities, same question. How are you getting in front of organizational decision makers? You're probably speaking at a lot of professional associations, maybe at their national conferences as a keynote, so that you're bridging from that speaking engagement to those long-term engagements. You're thinking about, what are the podcasts that CEOs are listening to? You're speaking at CEO forums like I've been doing a lot of recently. And if your answer is, everything in my business looks great, but thought leadership is the goal, maybe I'm a couple of years away from getting that book deal and wanting to go to agents and showing that I'm speaking regularly, then you're going to think about, what are the places in your respective industry where people come that's important for you to be a speaker at.
So good and so valuable, because I think that is the main probably drawback, is that people think you have to wait for somebody to invite you to come and speak once you're the expert. So it's really up to us to put ourselves out there and start using that muscle and really creating that space for ourselves. And I think that's the number one thing, whether it's getting publicity or, even building your brand, doing anything in entrepreneurship, especially, you have to give yourself permission first. Nobody else is just going to come along and give you, permission and guide you along the way. So
embedded in that answer too is the importance of relationships. It's one of the reasons why whenever I do a live event, I very specifically cap it at 50 or lower. Sometimes, depending on what the event is, it might be 25 or lower, for a couple of reasons. One, in any event where I'm trying to empower people to speak, to tell stories, to make more powerful calls to action, offers, whatever it is, if you're not getting up and doing it, it's not about cognition alone. You have to practice, get real-time behavioral-based coaching and feedback. But the other reason I do that is because of the importance of being able to build really outstanding relationships with the other people in the room. So I do an event every year called the Spotlight Master Treat. And again, that's one of those capped at 50 or less. And one of my favorite things is when people will tell me, I spoke at this person's event, they spoke at mine, how many people wind up speaking on each other's stages just because they've had opportunities to see one another speaking. We do a lot of matching people at tables based on their affinities so they can build relationships. But if you're wanting to speak, it's really important to build relationships with other coaches, consultants, experts in adjacent industries. And yes, of course, you can do that online, but there's nothing more magical than doing it at live events, even if you're a participant.
Yeah, that is brilliant. And I'm like, I want to sign up for that. But
offline, I'll share details with you on that.
But, relationships in anything, it always comes down to it. We have all these shiny online funnels and things like that, but really it always comes back to relationships. And I just love hearing that, because speaking about ripple effects, think about, all those people that's affecting by just having 50 people in one room. Like, it's so beautiful. So I would love to ask just a few more questions. The next one being, how can people really be strategic in growing their business, growing that thought leadership that you were speaking about? So once they get that first gig and they kind of have that plan of action, how can they be strategic moving forward?
Great question. All of your questions are great questions. So going back consistently to what is the primary business driver for me right now, and using that as a filter for gigs for a season. And depending on where you are, if you're brand new, a season might be a year. If you've been in your business 2 to 5 years, revenue's good, a season might be for the next 90 days or 6 months. But one of the ways I see people start to get paralyzed but also not see true growth is because they're flip-flopping. So right now I'm looking for private clients, now I'm looking for organizational clients, now I'm going to do a TEDx, rather than having one signature speech that might be evolving as you do speaking gigs, but having that one signature speech based on that seasonal business goal and doing it again and again and again. That's what all masterful keynote speakers do. Even if they have 4 to 5 topics listed, they're essentially doing the same thing. The only difference in the way it's listed is they might swap out some stories, have a slightly different call to action. And speaking of call to actions, another thing that I always teach my clients is to begin with the end in mind. Begin with your call to action. And our calls to action should have 2 components. Number 1, what do you want your audience to be able to do as a result of that presentation? Have they shifted their mindset? Have they let go of a self-sabotaging habit? Have they now the tools to be able to go do something in their careers and their businesses and their sex lives, whatever it is? And what do you want them to do with you? And I think that has gotten such a bad rap in the industry, that having a powerful call to action needs to be run to the back of the room and throw down a credit card and join my top tier program. And that doesn't work 90% of the time for anybody. And you're seeing even top leaders no longer do the run to the back of the room to join the 30K program. My recommendation is to think about, based on who this audience is and the culture of the event you're speaking at, what is the easiest yes you can get from that audience at that moment that is a bridge to everything else? So for some people who are speaking, let's say you're new to small groups, it might be a beautiful postcard that lets people sign up for a digital guide and check off if they want to call with you. And during that call, that's where you might be having a conversation to move them into your consulting package, your VIP day, your 6-month program, whatever it is. It's not to say that you can't have people make a purchasing decision on the spot. The purchasing decision might be like an easy no-brainer. So something that immediately builds off of what the presentation just was, some kind of system that's $47 that they can easily do, that then has an automated funnel that moves them into the next thing. Obviously, this is a tricky thing to talk about in a quick interview, but no matter who you are as a consultant, as an entrepreneur, as a thought leader, it's vital, in my opinion, to begin with that end and reverse engineer everything else so that it elegantly moves people to that final destination.
Oh my gosh, there's so many parallels. I use that exact term in my branding process. You need to look at the end goal, reverse engineer to where you're getting. And I love that too, because, I've been at those events, the back of the room, and I think it's just like, when people sign up for an opt-in on your website, you're not going to immediately be like, here's my highest level package, sign up. You need to nurture them and really like get that. They've heard you speak. So probably, like you said earlier, they're a little bit elevated in the know, like, trust factor, and they see your credibility. But maybe they've been following you if they're in the room, but it still just feels so jolting. And I feel like a lot of times that can create more buyer's remorse quickly. Like there's the energy of the room and then they walk away and they're like, oh, what did I do? So this way it probably just feels a lot better and more genuine to do it the process that you're speaking of.
I love this because it doesn't get talked enough. We don't talk about it enough, particularly in bro marketing cultures, but that buyer's remorse of, I just put down a big credit card. And I've had a lot of people in my programs who oddly have worked behind the scenes for some of these folks and now want to step into the spotlight, but they've been so traumatized from what they've seen, even if the thought leader is amazing, but just in the manipulative sales tactics, but also what they've seen in terms of the really hellacious conversations that happened in the next 90 days when people have buyer's remorse and things are either sent to collections or there's litigation and what have you. The structure that a lot of my clients and I use is when we do our own intimate events, whether it's 25 people in the room, 50 people in the room, somewhere in between. Yes, the know, like, and trust factor is so high coming out of that. And if we let folks know what is, even if it is our top tier program, what's on the horizon, but then give them a week or two and continue to nurture them during that time, show up powerfully, reinforce the experience they have, and then have that conversation about what that other experience is, the conversions are amazing. So I've seen consistently for myself, for other people, even with 15 people in the room, 50, 60% of people moving into a mastermind when there was not that pressure, when that person felt seen and they had time. Because the reality is that, I'm not talking about giving them 6 to 9 months, like a couple of weeks. But you want that experience to be able to stand on its own and just continue to build within someone. Like they've gotten enough tools to start to take the action, but they quickly realize if I'm going to go all in, I want more of you. And then it's like they've made that decision before you ever hop on the phone, before that application ever falls in front of them on the computer.
Yeah, talk about strategy. That's amazing. And I could talk all day about this, so it's hard not to keep talking about it because we do have to close out. But what I do want to say is that, it does feel like online world is shifting in that way. And so I love that you brought that up in the speaker world too. And I think, as we're moving into this next decade, that there's definitely a shift overall that's happening. So I love that we've talked about that. So just to wrap up, as a brand expert, I cannot help but ask a quick branding question. And then we'll move into my final question, which I've been asking everyone. But I'm just curious how important you feel that branding is, and really working on consciously building your brand is to speakers. Now I know, newbies might not be as far along in their brand, but so how does that help a new person if they have a brand in place, and how important is it to make sure that your branding is on point as you become more seasoned speaker?
It's critical. When we think of branding as the holistic process of not just the colors and the logo, but the messaging and how people feel when they interact with our brand, what it opens up in terms of possibilities for them. So the mistake I see, and I'm sure you see it too, is people thinking so small about what a brand is. And then getting so mired in, I have to have the perfect logo and the perfect website. And that's not necessarily the stuff I think that is going to last. It's the deep work, the kind that you take people through, where it's really getting clear on your point of view. What are the ideas you want to argue on behalf of and spread? And so when I see folks who are doing their speaking adjacent, like at the same time with their branding, it to me is beautiful, because then we're really locking into the ideas that you want to be known for, the brand that you want to have that's going to live through your speaking.
Yeah, and I really see that as your legacy work. Like for you, for instance, you have the Moxie piece, which ties across. It's the book. It's now going to be your podcast. It's, what you speak about. So it's very holistic. And oftentimes I'll see, somebody speaking about one thing, but then they're teaching something else. And then, they have a book that's about something completely different in some relations. So really getting clear on that holistic
And that was
view.
me for so long. It's painful. And, I think if people are listening and they're like, that's me, the question I would ask you to consider is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind? How do you want to imprint yourself in the mind, the heart, the soul of people? And rather than saying, once I get to this stage, then I can go after the message I really care about, bring it into let it be the focal point of your work from now and build off of it. I know we don't have the time, but it took a real come to Jesus moment for me when I was doing 50 billion different things as a coach and consultant and losing pretty much everything, from one 6-figure corporate client losing their funding. It emboldened me to say, this is the work I know that I'm called to do, but I don't know if I would be here right now if everything had been okay, but there hadn't been that critical need to reinvent. But we don't need to wait for that moment. Like, if you're feeling like you're circling around the perimeter of your message, your purpose, let this be an opportunity for you to say, like, no more BS, no more contorting myself into who other people want me to be. Let me get clear now on who I'm meant to be in my business and just do it.
So beautiful. Thank you. And I couldn't agree more with everything that you just said, and especially the fact how the brand and the speaking go together. Like, no matter where you're at, it's time to step into that. So it's so wonderful to see that the ripple effect that you're creating by empowering entrepreneurs, by empowering people in corporate across the globe. Can you talk, to close out, just a little bit more about your personal ripple effect and what your deeper mission is? And really, then we'll talk about how people can find you, and you have a wonderful gift for people today as well.
People will often think that my goal is to make people phenomenal speakers, and that is an outcome of what drives me, but it's not the primary goal. So I have a vision of connecting every single coach, consultant, expert, thought leader back with their own voice, because I think most of us had it. Something happened where we stopped trusting it, or we shifted it to be more of who we thought other people wanted us to be. So falling back in love with our own voices and then using them unapologetically to speak up in the world. For me, one of those drivers was having to find my voice after being sexually abused. As an adult woman, even doing this work, losing it again in postpartum depression. So I don't think we find our voice and then we never lose it. We develop the mindset and the tools so that when we inevitably lose it again and again, we can come home faster to it. So helping people really be advocates, not only in their businesses, but for the things, the many things in this world that need our voices attached to them. That's a big piece of what drives me as well.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's so powerful. And I love working with mission-based entrepreneurs. And so I'm just so glad that we connected. And thank you again so much for speaking with everybody today. So to make sure that they can follow you and learn more about your products and services, the best place to reach you at would be in Facebook, which is Alexia Vernon Empowerment. Or Instagram. Is there anywhere else, obviously, and then the website?
Yeah, so across social media, I try to keep it easy, Alexia Vernon. I have an open Facebook group called the Spotlight Speakers Salon, where I'm there every single week answering questions that pop up from folks who are wanting to step more boldly into speaking. You've got the free gift, and then will come April, for those who want to continue this kind of conversation, listen to the podcast, Moxielicious.
Awesome. Thank you again so much, Alexia. And like she mentioned, the free gift is 9 mistakes that coaches, consultants, and experts make as speakers and how to avoid them. So make sure you download that as well. And thank you once again, Alexia. We could talk all day, but we'll close it out for now.
Thank you.